Miss Geraldine Walker was 73 years old. She lived alone in a quiet neighborhood in Atlanta. She was known by everyone around as a kind, gentle, and respectful lady. People called her Miss Geraldine with love. She used to be a school teacher, and even after retiring, she helped kids with homework and read books at the library. She had short gray hair, always wore neat clothes, and smiled at everyone she met. On a sunny Saturday morning, Miss Geraldine woke up early. It was her grocery shopping day. She made a list carefully: milk, bread, green beans, and her favorite tea. She picked up her purse, wore her favorite hat, and stepped into her old but clean car. She loved driving on her own. It gave her a feeling of freedom. As she reached the grocery store parking lot, she looked around and found a good parking spot near the entrance. Slowly and carefully, she began turning her car into the space. Just then, a loud honk came from behind. Shiny pickup truck had pulled up fast, and the man inside looked angry. He rolled down his window and shouted something rude. Miss Geraldine tried to stay calm. She didn't reply. She just continued parking because she was already halfway in. The man, Randy Miller, a strong man in his late 30s, stepped out of his truck. He was wearing a cap and had sunglasses on. He walked fast toward her car and started yelling louder, calling her names and accusing her of stealing his spot. Geraldine slowly opened her door and got out. She looked at him and said, in a calm voice, "Sir, I was already parking. I didn't see you waiting," but Randy didn't care. He waved his arms, stood close, and kept shouting. People around the parking lot started looking, but no one stepped in. Geraldine took a deep breath. She didn't want to cause a scene. She locked her car and started walking toward the store. But before she could take 3 steps, she felt a hard push on her back. The man had shoved her from behind. Now, most people would think a 73-year-old woman would fall. But Geraldine did not fall. She didn't even stumble hard. Her body turned quickly. Her feet moved like she had been doing this all her life. Her hands came up steady and fast. Randy didn't know that this sweet, gentle woman had trained in karate for over 30 years. Back in her 40s, she had joined a martial arts class to stay strong. And she didn't just learn it for fun. She kept going year after year, till she earned a black belt. Miss Geraldine looked him in the eyes and said softly, "Don't touch me again." Randy laughed. He thought she was bluffing. He reached out to grab her wrist. But in one quick second, she turned his arm, twisted it, and tripped him. He fell backward onto the ground, landing hard. His cap flew off, and his glasses hit the pavement. Everyone nearby gasped. Phones came out. A couple of young people started recording the scene. They couldn't believe what they just saw. A gray-haired lady had just dropped a man half her age to the ground. Randy groaned, angry and confused. He tried to get up, but Geraldine stood calm, not moving an inch closer. She kept her hands up, in a gentle but firm stance. She wasn't going to fight more, only defend if needed. "I told you not to touch me," she said again, her voice still steady. The store manager and a couple of staff came running out. Someone had already called the police. People were now standing around, some cheering softly, some laughing in disbelief. Randy sat up, looking around. His anger had now turned into embarrassment. When the police arrived, they first separated. Randy started telling the officers that she attacked him for no reason. But several people stepped forward telling the truth. One woman said, "No, officer." She was walking away. He pushed her. She defended herself. Another man added, "I got the whole thing on camera," she warned him. He didn't listen. The officers took their statement seriously. They turned to Geraldine and asked, "Ma'am, are you hurt?" "No, sir," she replied. "I'm all right, just shaken, that's all." One of the officers looked curious. "Where did you learn to move like that?" he asked, surprised. "Geraldine?" chuckled Karate. "I've been training since I was 40. Keeps me strong." The officer smiled with respect. "Well, ma'am, you handled that well." Randy, now sitting silently on the pavement, had nothing more to say. He had been loud and aggressive just moments ago, and now he was quiet, red-faced, and surrounded by people who had seen everything. Geraldine didn't celebrate or act proud. She stayed humble as always. She simply said, "I don't like trouble, but but I don't run from it either. Later that day, her granddaughter Tamika came to visit her. She had already seen the video online. It had started going viral. People were calling her Karate Grandma and praising her strength and courage. "Grandma, you're trending." Tamika laughed. Geraldine shook her head. "I wasn't trying to trend, baby. I was just trying to get some tea and green beans." Tamika hugged her and said, "You've always been strong."
Ow!
The world knows it too. And Geraldine just smiled. She had never wanted fame. She only wanted to live peacefully and be treated with respect. But when the moment came, when someone tried to hurt her just because she was old and quiet, she showed the world that strength doesn't always look loud or young. Sometimes it comes with gray hair, calm eyes, and years of quiet discipline. That day, Geraldine Walker reminded everyone in that parking lot and many more people online that you should never judge a person by their age, their size, or their silence. Because sometimes the most powerful person is the one you least expect. Geraldine felt her heart beat faster as the younger man Randy lunged at her again. Time seemed to slow. She had trained for moments like this, yet she never expected to use her skills on a bright Saturday morning in a grocery store parking lot. Her legs moved on their own. She shifted her weight quietly and planted her feet firmly on the pavement. Her hands rose, palms open, ready to catch any attack. She knew she had to stay calm. Randy's face was red with anger. He had not expected Geraldine to stand her ground. His eyes widened in surprise when he saw her stance. He took another step forward, reaching out with both hands to grab her shoulders. Geraldine did not flinch. Instead, she leaned back, guiding his momentum forward. She kept her eyes on his chest, watching every small movement. As his hands closed on her jacket, she pivoted on her left foot. Her right hand slipped under his wrist and twisted it gently but firmly. Randy let out a surprised grunt. His grip loosened instantly. She heard the sound of his breath catch. Then she brought her left leg up softly and placed it behind his ankle. With a quiet shift of her hips, she tripped him. He fell forward, crashing to the ground with a loud thud. Dust rose around him like a small cloud. People gasped and backed away. A woman screamed and a child started to cry. All eyes turned to Geraldine. She stayed still, her body relaxed but ready. She watched Randy struggle on the ground, his face pressed against the rough asphalt. He tried to push himself up, his hands scraping against the concrete, but he could not find his balance. He looked over at Geraldine, confusion and pain on his face. Geraldine took a small step back. She did not want to hurt him more. Her breathing was even. She kept her arms at her sides, open and peaceful. "Sir, I told you not to touch me," she said softly. Her voice was calm, almost gentle. There was no hate in it, only a firm warning. Someone, near the entrance to the store, pressed an emergency button, and a loud alarm rang inside. Staff hurried out, and a few brave customers came closer to see what was happening. A tall man held his phone up, recording the scene. Another woman dialed 911 on her phone. The tension in the air grew heavy, like the moment before thunder cracks. In the sky, Randy finally managed to get to his knees, rubbed his hand where it had twisted. He looked at Geraldine with anger burning in his eyes. He opened his mouth to shout, but he stopped. People were staring. He saw the disgust on some faces. He realized his shirt was torn where he had fallen. His pride hurt more than his body. Geraldine waited quietly. She did not want to gloat. She knew that true strength meant using force only when necessary. Out. And collected. Then she looked up and noticed a young man in a blue polo shirt. The young man hesitated, but Geraldine gave him a slight nod. He walked forward. The young man crouched down beside Randy. He offered a hand, not to help him up, but to check if he was hurt badly. Randy spat on the ground and pushed the hand away. He climbed to his feet roughly, brushing off his pants. Geraldine stood her ground, watching, ready to move again if he attacked. The police arrived a minute later, sirens wailing. 2 officers stepped out of their cruiser and quickly moved between the two. One officer knelt by Randy, the other by Geraldine? The taller officer asked Geraldine calmly. Ma'am, are you okay? Geraldine nodded and answered, I'm fine, officer. Thank you. She spoke quietly, politely. She could see the taller officer glancing at her hands as if he expected bruises. But her skin was smooth, untouched. She smiled faintly, hoping. To ease his worry, the younger officer turned to Randy. Sir, you need to step back and calm down. Randy stared at Geraldine for a moment, then his gaze slid to the officers. He took a deep breath and stepped back. The officer gently placed a hand on his shoulder and guided him to stand still. Geraldine's granddaughter, Tamika, pushed through the crowd, her face pale with worry and excitement. Grandma! She cried. She reached Geraldine's side and wrapped her arms around her. Geraldine patted Tamika's back softly. She whispered, I'm all right, baby. Tamika looked at Randy and then at her grandmother. They're calling you a hero online, she said, her voice shaky. Geraldine shook her head. I'm no hero, Tamika. I only defended myself when he pushed me. The taller officer scribbled notes on his pad. He looked at Geraldine with respect. He asked her, Ma'am, do you want to press charges? Geraldine nodded. I believe he assaulted me. I want the record to show he harmed me first. The officer replied, We will take your statement and review the video footage. We have witnesses too. He nodded at two middle-aged women who were giving statements to another officer as officers collected Randy's information. Geraldine quietly told Tamika to fetch her purse. She reached in and pulled out her karate identification card. It was a thin card that showed her name, the dojo where she trained, and the black belt rank she held. She handed it to the officer. This shows I trained in self-defense. She, said the officer, examined it. His eyebrows went up. Ma'am, when did you earn this? I've been training since I was 40. I tested for black belt when I turned 50, she explained. You still practice? He asked, amazed. Not like before, but enough to protect myself, she said softly. The officer nodded. He turned to Randy's officer. Looks like she knows what she's doing. The officer nodded and wrote a note nearby. Someone asked Geraldine if they could post her picture online. She shook her head. Please don't. I just want peace. But her granddaughter smiled. People will talk about it anyway. Let's hope it helps others learn about respect. Geraldine sighed and accepted the inevitable. Once the officers finished taking notes, they allowed Geraldine and Tamika too. Geraldine walked slowly, leaning on Tamika's arm. Every step she took, people stepped aside to let her pass. Some nodded at her, others whispered, Good for you, Grandma. Geraldine tried to smile at those who praised her. She felt proud, but also sad that society still expected people to fear the elderly. She wanted to show that aging did not mean weakness. Strength came in many forms, sometimes quiet, sometimes gentle, and sometimes hidden beneath a calm exterior. Later, after the police had left and the parking lot returned to normal, Geraldine and Tamika sat in the car. The engine hummed softly. Tamika turned to her grandmother. What happened back there? Did it scare you? Geraldine looked out the windshield, thinking, not really scared. Surprised, yes. But I felt ready. She reached over and held Tamika's hand. Sometimes you need to protect yourself. I taught karate not just to fight, but to learn discipline and awareness. Tamika nodded. I always knew you were strong. I just never saw you use it like that. Geraldine smiled. I hope no one else has to use it. But if they do, I want them to know they can. Tamika wiped a tear from her eye. I'm so proud of you. They drove off slowly, leaving the parking lot behind. Geraldine held her purse on her lap, her karate ID card inside. She hoped the officers and witnesses would tell the true story, that she defended herself and did not start the fight. She thought about the young man on the ground and wondered if he would learn something important that day. As they turned a corner, Tamika's phone buzzed with notifications. She glanced at the screen and saw video clips of Geraldine in action, shared hundreds of times. Thousands of comments praised her bravery. Some even asked if she would teach self-defense classes for seniors. Geraldine looked at Tamika, her eyes calm. Maybe, she said quietly. Maybe I will. They drove in silence for a while, the streetlights guiding them home. Geraldine felt a mix of emotions, relief, pride, and hope. She hoped her story would remind people that respect matters, that everyone, no matter their age or size, deserves dignity. And if anyone tried to take that away, they might meet someone like Geraldine Walker, a quiet hero with a black belt and a gentle heart. The sun began to set as they reached her house. Tomika helped Geraldine inside and made her a cup of warm tea. Geraldine sat in her favorite chair by the window, looking at the orange sky. She took a sip of tea and thought about her next step. She knew her life had changed in a small way. People would remember today. But she would continue her quiet life, teaching kids at the library, tending her small garden, and maybe, just maybe, teaching a self-defense class to her neighbors. Miss Geraldine Walker was still the same kind teacher and loving grandmother, but now she carried a new confidence, a reminder that true power lies in quiet strength, gentle discipline, and the ability to stand up for oneself when it truly matters. Geraldine woke up the next morning to the sound of her phone buzzing on the kitchen table. She reached for it slowly, her joints still a bit stiff from the day before. Tomika had sent her a message. "Good morning, Grandma. Did you sleep well?" Geraldine smiled and tapped out a quick reply, "Yes, dear," ready to face the day. She poured herself a cup of tea and looked out the window at the sun rising over her small garden. The roses she had planted last spring were in bloom, bright and hopeful. Later, Geraldine put on her favorite blue cardigan and stepped outside. She needed to go to the local police station to give a more detailed statement. She walked at a steady pace, enjoying the cool morning air. A neighbor, Mr. Thompson, waved from across the street. "Good morning, Miss Geraldine," he called. "I heard about what happened. You handled yourself like a champ." Geraldine waved back and felt a warm glow in her chest. She appreciated the kindness, but she wished people did not have to see an old woman fight just to get respect. At the station, the same officers greeted her with polite smiles. They led her to a small room where a recorder was waiting. Desjardins sat down and took a deep breath. The deputy asked her to describe everything that happened, from the moment she saw the parking spot to when the younger man had shoved her and she had defended herself. She spoke clearly and calmly, choosing her words with care. She included small details, like how her feet felt on the pavement and how the man's voice had sounded. She did not add drama or anger, she just told the truth. After she finished, the deputy reviewed the footage on a small tablet. Geraldine watched too. She saw herself pivot and trip the man, heard the gasp from bystanders, and felt a strange mix of pride and sadness. Pride because she had stood up for herself. Sadness because no one had stepped in to help until it was almost too late. The deputy nodded and said, "Thank you, ma'am. This will help a lot." Geraldine packed up her purse and left, feeling lighter now that the official record was complete. Outside the station, Tomika was waiting, holding 2 cups of coffee. "I thought you might be thirsty," she said, handing one to Geraldine. They walked to a bench under a magnolia tree and sat down. Birds chirped in the branches. A gentle breeze ruffled their hair. Tomika asked, "How do you feel now?" Geraldine sipped her coffee and said, "Fine, just tired." She paused, looking at her granddaughter's worried face. "But I'm glad it's over, at least officially." They sat in silence for a moment before a small news crew approached. A young reporter held out a microphone. "Miss Walker, would you share your thoughts on what happened?" They wore a friendly smile. Geraldine exchanged a glance with Tomika. She could say no. She could leave. She realized this was a chance to teach others. She took the microphone politely. "I wish things had gone differently," she began in her soft voice. "No one should fear an old neighbor in a parking lot. We all deserve respect, no matter our age." She spoke of kindness, of looking out for one another, and of the quiet strength that comes from years of discipline. The reporter thanked her and stepped back. That evening, they returned home. Geraldine checked her phone again. Notifications blinked endlessly. Messages from friends, from old students, from neighbors. Even people she did not know had reached out. Many had seen the video online. Some sent words of admiration. Others asked if she would teach a self-defense class. Geraldine felt overwhelmed. She poured another cup of tea and sat in her favorite chair, letting the warmth seep into her hands. She thought about the idea of teaching again. It had been years since she led any classes at the dojo. Her knees were not as strong as they once were, but she felt a spark of purpose she had not felt in a long time. For the next few days, Geraldine's story spread. Local newspapers ran her photo next to the headline, "Karate Grandma Stands Up to Parking Lot Bully." Social media pages shared her calm voice and steady stance. Some wrote about ageism. Others praised her skill. Her phone rang with interview requests. A radio station called. "Would you like to come on our morning show?" they asked. Geraldine hesitated. She was shy. Yet she remembered Mr. Thompson's words, "You handled yourself like a champ." She realized that by sharing her story, she could help others learn respect and courage. So she agreed to the radio interview. On the morning of the show, Tamika drove her to the studio. Geraldine wore a simple necklace that Tamika had given her for her 70th birthday. It was a silver pendant in the shape of a lotus flower. She took a deep breath as they walked inside. The host greeted her warmly and asked about her life. Geraldine spoke of her years as a schoolteacher, of her late husband who had encouraged her to try karate, and of how the practice had given her confidence and calm. She emphasized that martial arts was not about violence, but about discipline, respect, and self-awareness. The host nodded and thanked her for her wisdom. After the interview, Geraldine returned home with Tamika. She felt a mixture of relief and excitement. That night, she dreamed of her old dojo. She saw herself wearing her white gi, bowing to her students, teaching them balance and breathing. She heard the soft clap of hands at the end of class, the respectful silence that followed. She woke up with a decision. She would hold a small workshop in her community center. She would teach basic moves to seniors to help them feel safe and strong. She reached out to the center's director, Mrs. Alvarez, who knew her from book club. Mrs. Alvarez was thrilled. She booked the large room with padded floors and set the date for 2 weeks later. Geraldine felt her heart race with both nerves and joy. She gathered her old karate belts, her training notes, and even a few wooden boards for breaking demonstrations, if any brave soul wanted to try. She practiced her speech in front of her mirror, making sure to speak clearly and kindly. When the day arrived, seats filled quickly. Seniors of all shapes and sizes sat on the mats, some leaning on canes, others using walkers. Geraldine stood at the front and bowed. "Thank you for coming," she said softly. "I am Geraldine Walker. I used to teach karate to younger people, and I want to show you that it is never too late to learn something new." She showed them how to stand, how to breathe, and how to move their feet. She guided their arms in simple blocks and stances. She kept her voice gentle and encouraging. She reminded them that the goal was not to fight, but to feel safe. As the workshop went on, Geraldine walked among the students, correcting their posture and offering kind words. When one man said he could not lift his leg high enough, she demonstrated how small steps could still be effective. When a woman asked if she would feel foolish, Geraldine smiled and said, "We all start somewhere." The room filled with soft laughter and determination. At the end, Geraldine invited anyone who wanted to try to break a board to step forward. 5 seniors volunteered. With careful guidance, each one stood and struck gently but firmly. The boards cracked under their hands, and the room erupted in applause. Some participants had tears in their eyes. Geraldine felt tears of pride and of gratitude. After the workshop, Mrs. Alvarez hugged Geraldine. "That was wonderful," she said. "Your lessons go beyond self-defense. You have given them hope." Geraldine looked around at the smiling faces and felt a deep warmth in her heart. That night, back in her home, Geraldine wrote in her journal. She wrote about the parking lot, the shove, and how she felt her body move. She wrote about the police station, the interviews, and the workshop. She wrote about respect and how it should be given freely. She closed the journal and kissed it gently. In the days that followed, Geraldine's story settled into the community. People still greeted her with nods of respect. The grocery store, Manager offered her a parking permit that read "Reserved for Miss Geraldine Walker." She thanked him, but left it in her car as a reminder that respect was earned, not gifted. Geraldine continued her quiet life, visiting the library, helping with homework at the school, tending her garden, and now she carried herself a bit differently. She walked with her head held high, her back a little straighter, knew that strength could be quiet. It could be a single, calm voice saying, "Don't touch me," or a simple bow on a mat. It could be telling the truth, sharing your story, or teaching others to find their own power. Her granddaughter, Tamika, often asked, "Are you tired, Grandma?" Geraldine would smile and say, "Maybe a little, but my heart is full." And as she sipped her evening tea and watched the roses sway in the breeze, she felt that her true lesson had begun, that courage, respect, and kindness could grow in anyone, at any age, and that sometimes the most powerful person is the one you least expect. After the workshop, Geraldine felt a warm pride in her heart. She had stood in front of those seniors and shared her knowledge. Now she welcomed a new chapter in her life. The next morning she woke early, as she always did, begun to peek over the rooftops, and a gentle breeze drifted through her window. She made her tea and sat by the window, thinking of all that had happened. She remembered Randy's shocked face in the parking lot, the police station, the interviews, and the workshop full of eager faces. Soon, there was a knock on her door. It was the manager of the grocery store, Mr. Patel, holding an envelope. He smiled kindly and said, "Miss Walker, thank you for everything you have done. Please accept this." Inside the envelope was a special parking permit. It was small, made of thick plastic, and printed with her name, "Reserved for Miss Geraldine Walker." She looked up at him, surprised and touched. He told her, "We want you to have a safe spot. You showed us what real strength is." She thanked him, but felt a blush on her cheeks. She did not like attention. She accepted the permit and tucked it gently into her purse. As she walked to her car later, she noticed that people stepped aside for her. A young mother holding a child let her go first, and the child waved at her. Geraldine gave a soft wave back.
"Aye."
She thought of how respect could change a moment. Where once a bully had shoved her, now strangers held doors open and spoke kind words. She felt the shift in her neighborhood, and it filled her with hope. That afternoon, Geraldine went back to the dojo where she had trained so many years ago. The old wooden floors creaked under her feet as she entered. She saw the sensei, Mr. Lee, still there after all these years. He had taught her in her 40s, helped her test for her black belt, and shared his wisdom about life. He wore a gray GI, his hair tied back, and his eyes lit up when he saw her. "Miss Geraldine," he called, bowing deeply. "It is an honor to see you again." She bowed too, smiling. "Sensei Lee," she said softly, "thank you for everything." They sat and talked about the workshop and how she had handled the parking lot incident, nodded and placed a gentle hand on her. "Shoulder, you have done well," he said. "You have showed the world what true karate means: discipline, respect, and peace." Geraldine felt tears in her eyes. She had not thought of herself as a teacher anymore. But Sensei Lee's words reminded her of her purpose. He then asked, "Would you like to return to teach at the dojo? If we could use your guidance for our new adult class." Geraldine hesitated. Her knees were not as strong as they once were. She thought of the seniors she had helped at the community center. She remembered their bright eyes and determined smiles. She realized she still had more to give. She nodded. "Yes, Sensei, I would be honored." Over the next week, she helped set up a new adult class at the dojo. She wrote a simple flyer with bold letters: "Karate for adults built confidence and strength at any age." Sensei Lee and the other instructors placed flyers in the library, community center, and local shops. Soon, a small group of adults, some in their 60s, others in their 40s, came to join her. They wore borrowed G's and soft smiles. Geraldine guided them through warm-up exercises, teaching them how to breathe and move. She spoke gently, reminding them that karate was not about fighting, but about knowing oneself and standing tall with respect. Word of her classes spread quickly. A local newspaper sent a photographer to take pictures of her surrounded by her students. The photo showed the seniors practicing simple blocks, their faces focused and determined. The headline read, "Karate Grandma Inspires Community with Adult Classes." Geraldine's cheeks turned red when she saw the photo. She did not like being the center of attention, but she knew this story could help others find courage too. One afternoon, as she was teaching a group of 10, her granddaughter Tamika sat in the corner, watching and smiling proudly. After class, Tamika approached her and said, "Grandma, they all say you changed their lives." Geraldine patted Tamika's hand. "I just gave them a chance to learn what I learned years ago. They had the strength inside them all along." In the evenings, Geraldine returned home tired but happy. She made a light dinner and sat at her small kitchen table writing her thoughts in her journal. She wrote about the people she had met, their stories of fear and then of newfound confidence. She wrote about the power of one quiet action to spark change. And she wrote about respect, how a simple gesture, like holding a door or giving a parking spot, could lift someone's spirit. Soon, a community leader invited her to speak at the town hall. They wanted her to share her story of self-defense, of teaching, and of changing hearts. She accepted, although she felt nervous. On the evening of the talk, the town hall was packed. People sat in folding chairs, leaning forward, waiting to hear her speak. She took a deep breath and stepped to the podium. The room fell silent. Began by telling her story of the grocery store parking lot, of the push, and of her calm response. She spoke of fear, and then of the choice to stand tall and protect oneself with respect. She shared lessons of karate, to breathe, stay aware, and use strength only when needed. She talked of the workshop at the community center, of her students breaking boards for the first time. She spoke gently, her voice steady and warm. Afterward, a man in the front row stood up. He was a retired police officer. He said, "Miss Walker, your story shows us that respect and calm can build safety. I've worked in law enforcement for 30 years, and I have never seen an act of self-defense so peaceful and strong." The audience applauded. Geraldine smiled, her heart full. On the way home, Tamika held her hand. "You were amazing," she said softly. Geraldine replied, "I only spoke the truth. I hope I helped others see that strength can be kind and that respect is for everyone." In the days that followed, people often stopped her on the street. They thanked her for teaching them, for speaking at the town hall, and for showing the world that age is not a weakness. She nodded and smiled, grateful. She still had simple joys, her tea in the morning, her garden, and stories at the library. But now, she also had a newfound role as teacher and guide for her neighbors. As summer turned into fall, the adult karate classes grew. Geraldine found herself with more students than she had rooms. Sensei Lee helped her find a larger space at the community center. Together, they expanded the program. They even invited local youth to join free sessions on respecting elders and learning basic self-defense. The program bridged generations, bringing young and old together on the same mats. One Saturday, Geraldine sat on the edge of the mat, watching her students practice. She saw a young man help an older woman adjust her stance. She saw children bow respectfully to seniors. She saw smiles and nods of encouragement. She felt a deep joy she had not known before. Her life, once quiet and routine, had become a source of inspiration for others. That evening, she wrote in her journal, "Today, I saw respect in motion. Age and youth side by side, learning from each other. This is what karate taught me. Harmony, discipline, and kindness. May I always remember to use my strength with a gentle heart." She closed the journal and looked around her cozy room. Her GI was folded neatly on a chair. Black belt hung on the wall. Her karate ID lay on the desk. She realized that each item told a story of a young teacher who found karate, of a single shove in a parking lot, of a calm defense, and of a community transformed. She smiled, thinking of all the lives she had touched, and of the many more yet to come. Geraldine woke before dawn, as she often did. The air was cool and still, and the first light of morning painted her garden in soft pinks and golds. She made her favorite tikka meal, with a touch of honey, and carried the steaming cup outside. She settled in her old rocking chair beside the roses she tended. She breathed in deeply, feeling the calm before the day began. Today was special. It marked 6 months since the parking lot incident. In the time since, Geraldine's life had grown richer and busier in ways she'd never expected. She had taught self-defense workshops, led adult karate classes, spoken at town meetings, and inspired her neighbors. Yet every morning she returned to this quiet moment, reminding herself why she started: to share respect, strength, and hope. Her granddaughter, Tamika, arrived soon after with 2 cookies on a small plate. "Good morning, Grandma," she said, setting the plate beside the tea. "I brought your favorite oatmeal cookies." Geraldine smiled and reached out to take one. "Thank you, dear. You always know what I like." They sat in companionable silence for a few minutes, listening to birdsong. Then Tamika asked softly, "Grandma, what do you think people remember most about you now?" Geraldine thought for a moment, gazing at the sunrise. "I hope they remember that respect is a simple gift," she answered, "and that strength can be quiet." Later that morning, the karate studio filled with students. The older adults, some in their 60s, some in their 70s, arrived first, wearing light workout clothes and bright smiles. A small group of teenagers from the youth program also joined, eager to learn respect and self-control. Geraldine welcomed each person with a warm nod and a gentle bow. As she had taught them, she began with breathing exercises, showing them how to stand with their feet shoulder-width apart, bodies tall but relaxed. She guided them through simple stretches and warm-ups. Then she introduced basic techniques: a block, a step, a gentle strike pad for practice. She spoke quietly, encouraging them to focus on balance and calm, not power. "Karate's not about fighting," she reminded them. "It's about knowing yourself and respecting others." As they practiced, Geraldine moved among them, offering kind corrections and words of praise. She watched a tall man in his 60s steady his stance, a teenage girl find courage to try a low block, an elderly woman lift her knee a little higher than before. She saw determination in their eyes and felt a deep joy in her heart. After the session, they formed a circle. Geraldine asked each person to share one thing they learned. A man with gray hair spoke first. "I learned I can be stronger than I thought," he said. A teenage boy next said, "I learned to respect people, no matter how small or quiet they seem." An older woman added, "I learned it's never too late to try something new." Geraldine listened, her eyes bright with pride. They closed with a bow to each other and to the Sensei Geraldine herself. She held her hands together in front of her chest and said, "Thank you for sharing this time. Take these lessons into your lives. Be calm, be aware, respect each other, and stand tall when you need to." They bowed back, and the room filled with warm applause. That afternoon, Geraldine and Tamika visited the library, where Geraldine volunteered to read 2 children. She carried a stack of picture books about kindness, courage, and respect. The library staff had arranged for her talk there next week, a special reading, followed by a simple demo of self-defense moves. Geraldine felt a flutter of nerves, but also excitement. She wanted the children to know they could stand up for themselves, and others with calm and care. Later at home, Geraldine sat at her desk and opened her journal. She wrote about the morning's class, the stories shared, and the happiness she felt. She wrote down plans for her library presentation, noting which books she would read and which moves she would show. She sketched small diagrams of a block and a safe breakfall, reminding herself to keep it simple and fun. That evening, the community center held a small celebration in her honor. They called it a night of respect and strength. The room glowed with soft lights, and neighbors brought snacks and flowers. The mayor spoke about how Geraldine had changed their town, making people feel safer and more united. Students shared stories of how her classes had helped them feel confident on dark streets or calm and tense moments. When it was Geraldine's turn to speak, she stood and looked at the faces around her, young and old, neighbors and friends. Felt a gentle warmth spread through her chest. She cleared her throat and began in a soft, steady voice. "Thank you all for being here," she said. "I never expected any of this. only wanted to share something that helped me a way to find calm and respect. I learned karate for myself, to stay strong and independent as I got older, but I always believed that its true power was in kindness, discipline, and using strength only when needed. She paused, looking at Tamika, who nodded encouragingly. We live in a world where people sometimes forget to be kind. They forget respect. But it is simple. Hold the door. Give a smile. Step aside for someone who needs help. And if you ever feel unsafe, remember you have the right to stand up for yourself with calm, with care, and with courage. She saw eyes glisten in the audience. A hush fell over the room. Then applause began, soft at first, then growing louder. She bowed her head and let the applause wash over her. Afterwards, people came forward to hug her, to thank her, to tell her how she had changed their lives. A young woman said, "You helped me face my fear of walking alone at night." An older man said, "You showed me I could learn something new even at my age." Geraldine listened, her heart full. As the night wound down, Tamika held her grandmother's hand. "I'm so proud of you," she whispered. Geraldine squeezed her hand. "I'm proud of all of us," she replied. "We changed our community with simple respect and quiet strength." Later, back at home, Geraldine sat in her favorite chair, sipping chamomile tea. She thought about the journey she had taken from a gentle school teacher to a karate student, from a shy retiree to a community leader. She thought about the shove in the parking lot that had sparked this new path. She realized it had not been the shove itself, but her choice to stand tall and calm. That had changed everything. She reached for her journal and wrote her final thoughts for the night. True strength is gentle. True courage is calm. Respect is the simplest gift we can give each other. May we all carry these lessons in our hearts, and may we stand tall with kindness whenever we are tested. She closed the journal, set her cup on the table, and looked out at the moonlit garden. The roses glowed softly in the silver light. She felt peace, pride, and hope. Her life had become a quiet example of courage and respect. And she knew that, long after she was gone, her story would live on in the hearts of those she had touched. And as she drifted to sleep that night, she dreamed of students practicing blocks, of children listening wide-eyed, and of neighbors holding doors open for each other. She dreamed of respect sharing its gentle power, turning small acts into big changes. And in that dream she smiled, knowing she had done her part to make the world a kinder, braver place.